Hi everyone, Lauren Elizabeth here with Lauren Elizabeth Animal Art, and I help beginner through professional level artists reduce stress while mastering the art of animal art. In today's animal painting tutorial for stress relief, we will be painting this pit bull. This is just in time for Father's Day, and this is definitely a longer one, a little bit longer than I normally do, so I've broken it up into two parts. The first part is transferring our sketch, painting the dog, starting our background, and then next week when I post part 2, maybe even a little sooner, that will be the full background. Now the other great part about this tutorial is that as we paint this pit bull, I go through my 12-step dog painting process. I will go through it from the beginning to the very end of this tutorial, plus I have a review in part 2. So by the time you finish this pet portrait, you will feel comfortable enough to be able to paint your own dog or another dog. Now to go along with this tutorial, I have a list of materials, I have a traceable printout, I also have other links to other videos I've made with guides on my 12-step dog painting process. And last but not least, guys, I am doing a huge giveaway. I'm actually giving a $100 Amazon gift card to 2 winners, and it ends on June 5th. And all you have to do is take a 5 to 6 question survey, which I have also linked down below. And you have to either belong to Lauren's public YouTube community, it's on Facebook, and or my online Animal Art Masterclass. Alright guys, without further ado, let's get painting. Alright creatives, so at this point you should have your traceable printout transferred to your paper or canvas. It's either 8 by 10, that works really well with the traceable. If you are using 11 by 14 like I am, then you have to extend out the paw a little bit more. Now while I paint, I'll be sharing my painting process. I'll also be adding in more artist tips and notes about my 12-step dog painting process. I'll also leave up the reference photo all the way to the end. And then next week I will post part 2 if it's not already up. Don't forget to make this fun, take a few deep breaths, find a comfy chair, and let's get painting. I'll use a large flat brush here. I have a big canvas, so I'll probably use a much larger flat brush than I'm used to using when I'm painting my 8 by 10. So first color I have on my paint palette, I have my orange, cadmium, or this is permanent red, cadmium yellow, and white. So I'm going to pull some permanent red and lots of orange. I'm going to start with my left side, move to my right, and I'm going to start with a deep vermilion reddish orange on the left side. Alright, so step 1 of the dog painting process we already have down. That's to apply your sketch to your canvas. It can be plain white canvas. And then we're on to step 2, which is to work on your background. Now it's very important to have your background almost all completed or entirely completed before working on the fur. That's especially if you have a long-haired dog. In this case, we have a short-haired pup like pit bulls often do, and so we don't really have to worry so much if we want to change our background later. I'm just going back and forth, left and right to cover my canvas. Gonna work on my sides as well. Alright, so I just want to point out that we're going to be painting above the line. We see the line pretty obvious on the left side, but on the right side as we move from left to right with our colors, that little bit of yellow is going to go under that arm on the right side. It may be easier, and this happens often, I'll switch brushes so I can go in between those little areas. So I'm using a small flat brush here just to get in between this left ear. I just want to explain why it's important, if you have a long-haired dog, why it's important to complete your background before painting the fur is because if you paint your background and it's not completed, but it's partially completed, but then you apply fur to those areas that are left white, then you have to go back and reapply that background color all around the little fur strands. And then you might even have to touch up those strands of fur that you applied. So it's just a really, you just make it a longer process than it needs to be, which is why I really recommend trying to get your background done before, but I don't stress it so much with a short-haired animal, kind of like this pup here. Okay, so I will stop about the center of the head because now we're going to start working a little bit lighter. I want this to kind of get a light orange, almost a pinkish maybe. And so I'm going to pull in some white and a little bit of yellow into the color we were just using. I'm just going to mix it together. And while that's wet, I'm just going to blend it in straight on my canvas. I'm going to let this brush just kind of do the trick, brushing left and right, back and forth. So this is kind of like a medium value. We have our darker value on the left, medium value here, lighter value on the right. So we have our medium value here. I'm going to go a little bit lighter, just adding in more white and more yellow. You know, I really like that, so I think I'll just keep it more of a yellowish color. You can though, guys. You can make this any color you'd like, any color background. Once again, while that's still wet, I'm just going to blend it on my canvas. Going back to my smaller brush just to get it around the right ear now. And we can't forget, there's these little areas under the arm that I'm going to paint in. I think I'm going to use a different flat brush just because I want it clean and damp. And I'm going to grab a tiny bit of black, a good amount of white. Kind of want this a medium value, not almost black, but I want it pretty dark. And I want enough of it so I can cover the bottom. And I'll just paint the bottom half now. Now, it's very important to pinpoint your light source, especially at the very beginning. We have a lot of light hitting the left side of our pup, and so that means everything on the dog on the left side is going to have the lighter values, and then everything on the right side is going to have our darkest values. And those medium values are the joiner colors, the ones in between. Now there's no rules that you have to make the background consistent with the light source. You can if you want to, if you're painting more realistically than you would. I'm kind of there in between. I'm a semi-abstract artist, so I kind of make up my own rules while also following the ones according to the reference photo. So right now I added a little bit more white to my gray because I am trying to stay consistent with the ground being lighter on the left side, kind of my medium values in the middle, and then darkest towards the right side. All right, so I'm just blending this on my canvas while it's wet, the medium gray into my lighter gray. All right, so we have our sketch, then we painted our background. Now it's time to work the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. I will use a small detail brush, like a round brush, and I'll use just black to fill in the nostrils, black to fill in the pupils, outline the eyes, as well as outline the nose. However, if I have let's say a brown dog with a brown nose, I will use a dark brown to outline the nose, not black. And I will also include the mouth in this step. We have a closed mouth here, so we'll use a dark gray to outline the mouth. Okay, so just starting with black and my round detail brush, I'm going to fill in the nostrils. Now this is a dark gray nose. So I think I wouldn't go outline it with black. That's just too dark. I think I'll just lighten it up so it's a dark gray, and then I'll outline the nose that way. All right, I'm gonna use my black still, however, to outline that little indent we have that cuts the nose in half. To the left, I'm just going to outline the mouth to the left and the right. All right, let's go create our gray, just adding a little bit of white to this black. Honestly, I'm just making a dark gray, so I don't need much white. And I'm going to outline the nose. Now there's a few other parts, especially of a pit bull's nose, that I see this a lot on other dog noses, but I really see it on a large dog's nose where they have this like indent right along the insides of both, like on the left and right sides of this indent. I'll often see this little curve that comes over on the bottom of the nose. You can even take this along the bottom here as well. That actually connects like this. There's a little part that I didn't add there. All right, gonna wash out my brush now, and then I'm gonna fill in the black areas of the eyes. So that's the pupils and then the shadows that we have. I will get smaller I need to get a little bit smaller because we're going to be doing a little bit more detail here. And that's just black. Okay, I'm going to outline this eye. And now I'm going to fill in the pupil. Pupil is in the upper, dog's looking up to our right. So I'm just going to fill in that pupil. It's coming up in the upper right area of the eye. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing on the right eye, which we have a lot more darker values because it's getting less light. Now when your paintbrush starts to pull on your canvas, that's a sign that your paint is drying to your brush and you need to wash it out and then dry it off on a cloth or paper towel. I just did that. Now I'm going to pick up a little bit more black paint. Okay, so then I'm going to work on that pupil. This is a little tricky to see. I am going to fill in a little bit more dark area than I have it. Kind of went over my line a little bit. After we complete the eyes and nose, then we're going to start adding some colors to the iris of the eyes and also the white part. I'm not going to focus too much on detail in the initial steps. I don't want to get myself caught up. My main goal at the very beginning is to cover the white, and then slowly, layer after layer, I focus on detail. But I am going to cover up the whites in the eyes, and so first I want to keep this orange theme. I'm going to work in more oranges into the eyes, even though I can't really see it too well in the dog. I am going to grab some raw sienna that I can add to the eyes as well with my orange. I'm going to make the left side the lightest because we have the light source hitting the left side of the face. So I'm going to do with my round detail brush, I'm going to grab some orange and some raw sienna. Let's see how that looks. I'm going to add more orange than raw sienna because I don't want to make this too dark. And now I'm just going to paint in the color around the pupil very carefully. So I like this color. This is good. It has a brown tint to it. All right, now I'm going to work on the color in the right eye. I'm going to make this darker by adding more raw sienna to this mixture that we were just using and just a tiny bit of black. I know it's hard to see where that iris is right now. I'm having trouble seeing it too. I'll try my best. And then what I like to do on the area that's just slightly darker in the left eye, or whatever eye is facing the light source. I like to pull a little bit of that darker eye color into the one corner. Mix that in while it's wet and just make that a little bit darker. Now I didn't fill in this white area of the eye yet. We're going to use a light gray for that. I don't like to use just white with, I got so much animal hair on my table. I'm going to mix in more white than black for this, honestly, just the tiniest little pinhead size amount of black. And that's what I'll use to fill in this left area. Now I can go in with my black and touch up those areas of black that we applied that I went over with my colors. All right, once again, I'm going to prevent myself from getting too crazy with detail just by moving forward. I don't want to get obsessive over these details because we have a lot more white to cover. And I'm also going to let these eyes dry because we still have highlights in these eyes, but because the paint's still wet, I'm actually going to go back to those highlights later. All right, so we're still in the step of working on the eyes and nose. I'm going to work on adding color to the nose now. Now I love making my animal noses purples and blues. That's just something that's more interesting and fun to me. So I'm going to do that with this little guy's nose. Okay, so I'm still using my round detail brush. This is actually not my smallest one because we have some good surface area to fill in. I added violet to my paint palette. And again, our light source is hitting the left side, so we're seeing a lot of light values on the left side of the nose, touching the top of the right side of our nose. And so the darkest values will be added to the right side of the nose, as well as kind of in here on the right side of the left side of the nose. Let me demonstrate this with our colors. So I'm going to start with my darkest values. That's how I like to paint. Acrylics is a lot easier when you're starting with your darkest values and building up to your light. I'm going to grab a little bit of white and lots of violet and a little bit of black. That's going to be what I'll use. So that's white, violet, and black. And let's just start filling in the white on the right side of this dog's nose. So if you watch me, I'm just going to follow the reference photo where I see a dark gray. The value is the relative lightness or darkness of a color. You can honestly use any color you want as long as it has the correct darkness or lightness for that particular area. And I'm basically filling in kind of like shapes. That's kind of how I think of values and how I am able to place them in the right areas, because each one kind of, see how this creates this almost like curly shaped, and then up here it gets lighter, and then down here it gets much darker again. Not the typical shapes you think of like circles and triangles and rectangles, sometimes maybe. But that's kind of how I fill it in. And I'm very generous with my initial layers. So if I get too much in a certain area, that's okay, because we're going to be layering it over top with the next medium and light values. All right, so we did that area. I can probably take it over a little bit more, but we will be filling in our lighter and medium values right over there. All right, I can add this dark to the right side of the left side of the nose, like I mentioned before. I'm going to pull that down to the bottom of the nose. We usually see darker values on the bottom of our nose, just because light usually hits the top of the nose. All right, I see some darker areas right around this little curve in the nose here. And then as well as right around the left side. But where I'm leaving this white is where we're going to be adding our real light values. I also see some of this purple, and I can go around my outline here. This is the outline of gray that we used. You can keep it or leave it. I'm actually going to paint over it a little bit, and that's just kind of going around the left side slightly. And then I can carry this around anytime the nostrils. We'll also see dark values there because there's hardly any light getting in there. And then as it's moving out towards the nostril, it's also going to be dark. So I'm just going to fill in the inside of this part of the nostril. All right, you see how I did that? It's better to be generous to over apply, and it's also better to go too dark than too light. It can be really hard to make something darker when you've already applied bunches of layers to it. So I recommend going too dark at the beginning than too light. All right, so now the next layer that we'll add will be our medium values, not our highlights just yet. And all I'm going to do is just add white into this color we were just using. Violet's really strong, so we'll probably have to add a good amount. Okay, just mix that in, and now I'm just going to fill in the rest of the white. See, that's not even light enough, so I'm going to have to go a little bit more white. That's just really how I figure colors out. I just test them. They dry so fast that I can change it again. But I really don't get too held up on color, because I can just let it dry and then try again. You may need a smaller brush here. I might need to, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to my small detail brush because we're working with some small little pieces here. I can bring this down a little bit more because it is getting some light there. And there's some areas like right here, I actually made that, I left a little too much of my white there. It should be a purple because it kind of goes around that way. It's not going so much down that way. So that white that I left over, I want to make sure it's the correct value. That's why I'm going in with that purple. It shouldn't go down this way. It should kind of curve around like that around that left side of the nostril. All right, now for our highlights, our lightest values. I'm going to go in with my white even more into this purple and just apply this color to the lightest areas of the nose now. Our light source is coming from the left, so they're going to be really strong on the left side of the nose. A little bit on the top here. one right around the nostril. All right, so step 4 in the dog portrait painting process is now to apply the darkest values to the fur. All right, for this dog, because it's a gray dog, I'm going to use blue and some dark grays for the darkest values. So I've applied some phthalo blue to my paint palette. I'm going to go in with a medium to small flat brush. I think that might actually be too small. I'm going to get a little bit bigger just because our main goal is to cover up that white. Now for this step, I am looking at the areas of the reference photo that is the darkest. So in this case, a dark gray. I'm not looking for the light gray. I'm not looking for those in-between colors. I'm looking for the very darkest shadows. And we're going to be distorting colors here. I like to do that in my art, and I'm using phthalo blue, black, and white to get those values first. And that's phthalo blue, tiny bit of black, and white. We're going to create a navy blue for this. Now I see a lot of these darkest values on the right side of the dog, by the arm, the right side of the jaw, that right ear, underneath the left ear, and by that left paw. So we're going to be applying quite a bit of this color, so make sure you mix up enough. Now at any point, if you'd like more direction on how to paint your pet or other dogs, I have an online Animal Art Masterclass designed for creatives of all backgrounds, and this is where I go in real depth on how I mix my colors, apply them, how to draw animals, how to paint fur, dog eyes, noses, snouts, and I paint and teach in a way that helps creatives unwind, de-stress, and find the color in life. And in addition to all my cat and dog painting guides and tutorials, I also have a diverse range of wildlife tutorials. I do this because this is honestly what helped me many years ago when I was battling major anxiety, depression, and addiction, and it's something that still helps me with my mental health. So if this would bless you or a friend, that's all linked down below. But guys, let's get back to painting this pit bull. So I've created my dark navy blue with my phthalo blue, black, and a little bit of white, and now I'm going to work on the right arm. Now remember, we're looking for what we see as a very strong dark gray in a reference photo. We're being very generous, almost looking for the shape that they're making with this color. Because if you look closely, there's kind of shapes being made by those light gray highlights, the medium values, and the darkest values. Now I'm not painting the whole thing because I see some medium values, some light hitting the top part of this arm. I'm only going in the indents of the arm as well as the darkest areas getting the most shadows. Now remember, I'm just looking for the shapes that these values are creating. Random shapes that they create, and I'm just going to fill them in. All right, we see there's so much definition in a pit bull's face. They have such strong, defined faces. And I see this curve and this shadow right here along the jaw. Which kind of leaves a little bit of highlight along the right side, lower right side. Oftentimes, you can use your darker values to kind of outline some of the creases and the indents or any wrinkles in your dog, because you're not going to be getting too much light inside those wrinkles. All right, I see this darker value right here along the left side of the face, actually, where this dog is kind of making a interested expression. All right, so see this strip of white? Well, we don't know what color it is yet, but there's this strip here that I actually added in because I really wanted to add more color to this dog. So I'm just going to actually use this blue along the left side of that strip, and we'll add values to the inside of that with a different color. Oh, I see. I can use this color actually to fill in the outer part of the ear, not the inside, but the outer part. Anytime that, because I haven't gone to my water yet, I'm almost at that point though where my brush is getting sticky, and that's an indicator that I need to wash it out and then pick up some more paint. I'm not quite there yet, but I am close to it. All right, now I'm going to go to this side and just paint. I don't have as many dark areas like I do on that side, but I have a few. So where else do we see this color? Oh, so a little too sticky now. I'm going to move on with this color. I will need to actually mix up some more. So I'm going to wash up my brush and mix up some more. Phthalo blue, a little bit of black, and white. Alright, so I see this color, just this dark area right here on the left side of the face. We have some pretty strong highlights just hitting that, but this area it's darker. And then a little bit on the inside. Alright, definitely see it on the mouth. There's not much light getting under there. Isn't this pet portrait coming to life? Like, I feel like on step 4, you can slowly start to see that personality coming out. Alright, the right side of the snout is going to be a lot of blue. But we are getting light here, so I'm not going to go all the way to the end. See how there's just a little bit of highlight around that lip? These are the kind of subtle highlights that you become accustomed to seeing the more pet portraits you paint. So if you're having trouble kind of seeing, okay, what's a medium value compared to a darker value, it just comes over time and testing colors and just painting lots of pet portraits. I promise you'll start to see those shapes, and you'll also make lots of mistakes, and that's how we learn too. You'll learn what works and what doesn't. All right, we have some of this darker color on the left side of the snout. I love the droopiness of a pit bull's like snout. When it's up against something, it just it's so droopy and there's so much skin. All right, so here's a little tip as well. There are some medium values that I definitely see on the left side of this snout, but it's so close to a darker value, and I really recommend being more generous if you're not sure with your darker values at the beginning than you are with your medium and light values. So if you're not sure of a value, you can kind of apply a base of their darker value first, and then you can always kind of alter it and change it with your lighter values as you add more layers. Once again, I'm going to mix up some more of the same color, and we're going to paint the darker areas on the left side. Now just note that this part of the dog's paw is white. We're not going to paint that, so we're just going to go around that area. And I'm going to need a smaller brush. I'm going to go to my round detail brush, the one I used for the nose, to fill that area in. All right, we actually see some darker values underneath the paw that isn't this bluish color, but it's still a darker value, creating a shadow, and I'm still going to use it. I'm actually going to use this to fill in that area just because it is so dark. I see a little bit of it right here. Now there's just a little bit of this paw that I see here that is also going to be getting this darker value, but it's the slightest little highlight along it too. So I'm going to keep that white. All right, before we move on to our even darker value, because I said we were going to go on the inside of this ear, which is much darker, I still want to make sure I check to see if there's any of this painting that I can apply this color to, and I do see some. I do see some around the eyes. Along this indent here. Oh, this carries down. Just mixing up some more. I missed a little bit of this paw, so I'm going to fill in that paw. It's getting a little bit more of our lighter values, but not as much as we made it. So I'm just going to be layering that over top that area. So I'm just going to fill that in. I can bring this up a little bit more. We see a little bit of an indent, a little fold in the skin there. All right, so I think we're good. I think we're good with that color. Let's make a darker value. So I'm gonna actually simply use black and phthalo blue for this next step. The ears are just so dark that I'm gonna be able to use this dark value to fill it in around where we're seeing those floppy ears folding over one another. On the inside of this ear, it's just a little bit lighter where it's kind of sticking out. And we can actually outline this part because it's not getting much light, but as it moves out, it's kind of sticking out and getting much more light. As well as this side, I can do the same thing to that part of the ear too. And it's a little hard to see, but there's kind of like a little indent in the ear. Not entirely sure what it is, but I can see that it has some darkness in there that I can paint in. All right, guys, so we're at this point where we're now applying the medium values of our pet portrait. So that's step number 5. We are going to add in more of our lighter values, so lighter colors like white, into this color we were just using. I'm also going to add in more blue, and we're just going to progressively move from dark to light. I'm going to pull in some more phthalo blue into this navy blue that we were just using, pull in some white, and now we're simply going to look for those in-betweens, and this really stumps a lot of artists, and I don't blame you. This is not where our lightest values are located, and this is not where our darkest values are located. It's just those in-betweens, those colors that connect the two. And how I find this is just simply by looking where I applied the dark values. So I'm just basically hugging them with this color or adding to them. So I'm going to actually, I'll show you right now. In this area right here, I'm going over some of that dark blue while also going into more of that white. I'm giving them a hug, and I'm also adding to them to cover up that white that we really want to cover up at the beginning layers of our pet portrait. And I'm going to start with the right side of the face because it's the darkest, and I see quite a few medium values next to those darker values that we added. All right, now I'm going to start cutting into that the side of the snout where we kind of see the whiskers area. It kind of cuts in, curves in, and I'm going to start creating that curvature with this color. It's going to be tempting to get really caught up in making it in the exact perfect area that we see on the reference photo. You're not going to get it right perfectly every time. You kind of have to just figure things out and just see what works. You try it in one area, and if you don't like it, you can either go to your darker value or lighter. It's all right if you apply a medium value in an area that's a darker value. You can always fix that as you go along or towards the end. I just mixed up more of this color. I'm not making it any different. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm actually seeing some areas that I could have gone darker. I could have applied the darker value that we just were doing before. For instance, right here, I could actually go darker there. And you're going to find that you're going to see some areas, oh, I should have made that bit darker. And so what I'll do is I'll just leave it white and I'll go back to it before I move on to my highlights. Alright, so here's where I can go over that white that we mentioned before. I'm going to mix up some more of this color. So remember when I said I wasn't sure in this area if it should be dark or light value? I'm going to just test it out. I know that I'm going to have some pretty extreme highlights right here where we have white left. So right next to that, to join those two, I want to make sure I have some joining colors. So I'm just going to pull this medium value in right there. And I think it works. I think this is going to work just fine. I can actually pull this up above the nose. you notice that I didn't get all the wrinkles in the left side of the snout. I actually kind of skipped over a few wrinkles, and I'm just going to go with it. I'm not going to focus too much on that. There's a lot more lines and creases in there, and I'm just going to kind of, it still works. I'm not going to focus too much on that. Definitely have a lot of this blue, so I'm going to mix up some more. Now I'm also finding that I can apply this medium value to these areas that I also applied the darkest value, because it's connected to such a light value. We have to add a highlight to this area, so I want to make sure I have a proper joiner color. I don't want it to jump too fast to the highlight. Same with like right here. I'll be able to apply a highlight over top that, but I don't want it to jump too fast. Just gonna mix up some more. We have a fan running because it is a little bit steamy in our house, and it's drying my paint out. So if you are also running a fan close by, you might want to get a spray bottle. I always mention it and never have one next to me when I need it, but that can also help if you just want to spray your paint if you're next to a fan, or if you just live in an environment that is really hot and dry. All right, do you guys see anywhere else that we can add this color? I actually do. I see it right here where we have a little bit of white left on that hand, as well as this little part right above that claw. I'm just going to cover this up because it's such a skinny little highlight that I think I'll just layer that over top my medium value. And then I'm also going to fill in a little bit more of this medium value right over here where we need to add some more darks, and that's what we'll do next. It's not a problem if we have to go back. That actually is good. You want to make sure you get those darker values before you move to the highlights. So like I mentioned here, I need to go back because that should be darker. So let's go backwards a little bit. We're going to add in some phthalo blue and black to this color we were just using. I'm just kind of working it at a corner because we're going to need to use this color to go lighter. Okay, so I'm just going to fill in this darker value right up here. Okay, I see it. I see that we have this actually climbing around the eye. I need to add a little bit of black here because it's not quite dark enough. I didn't go dark enough at the beginning. You can even take advantage of this and just fill in any of the areas that you applied darker values that look a little too light. The paint isn't that thick and you want to thicken it up just with another layer. I definitely have a few of those areas, and I'll just do that now. All right, so we have just completed step 5, our medium values. Now step 6 and 7 of the pet portrait painting process is step 6, finish the connected parts. And what I mean by that is if you have any collars or any balls that are in the dog's mouth or any connected things to the animal that's touching the fur, this is step 6 that you would finish that now. We don't have any of that in this painting. So we're going to bypass that, and then step 7 is where you're going to define the fur more. So we were sort of starting to do that, kind of creating a little bit more of that wrinkled, furry look. But again, we're working with such a short-haired animal that we're not really going to do a whole lot of fur definition. So we are going to bypass 6 and 7. We're going to move to step 8, which is applying our lightest values, the light tones in the fur. And what I like to do is I tend to just simply add a lighter color to the color I was just using for my medium values. All right, so I'm going to mix in some more phthalo blue into the color we were just using, as well as some white. Now, another important note is I'm not just going to have one medium value. I'm not just going to have one highlight. I'm going to have a range of medium, dark, and light tones. Okay, we've only actually been using one for the different layers, but we're going to go backwards. What I like to do is I like to do a couple rounds to get all those values in. All right, but our main focus is blocking the color. We're not so focused on trying to do detail quite yet. All right, so I'm going to test out this color to make sure it's good. That's not light enough. It's too close to the previous color. So I need to add in more white. Still not quite there yet. I'm going to add in, I have a lot of dried paint here. Can add in more white. And I'm just going to look for those colors that I see light gray in the reference photo. I'm going to place this color there where I see a light gray. Now we are getting a little bit more detailed here because we're working with brighter colors. They're going to show up more easily. And so we're going to be very careful in applying these shapes, these lighter values, than the layers before this. This is also the step where we would start adding more defined strands of fur. So you want to add less paint to your brush because it really helps you control your paint a little bit better. If you have gobs of paint on your brush of your lighter value, you can really make things thicker that you don't want to make too thick. When you have like a long-haired dog or cat, they are just little clusters of lines, and I have other tutorials for that. I have a tutorial that shows you how to paint animal fur, and I'll link that down below. have a little bit of a furry look that I see up here. So here's a great example of how I'm going to kind of make that fuzzy look, clustering lines together using the tip of my brush to create the point of those fur strands. My brush is getting a little dry and sticky, so I'm going to make sure I wash it off, make sure it's clean and damp, and go back into my colors, which I'm going to have to make some more of because I'm out. Now you're probably wondering why I'm leaving the white part of the dog white, and I haven't gone to that. I like to start with the darkest areas of the dog, so if it has spots, I'm going to work on those darkest spots first before I work on the lighter part of the dog. All right, I'm just going to focus on dark, medium, lights for that area, and then I'm going to move and do the same thing. Focus on my dark, medium, lights for the lighter area. Does that make sense? I break it into parts just so it helps me make sure I get the proper values. Alright guys, so we have completed our dark, medium, lights on the dark area of the pup. And I could go and do my rounds where I repeat those steps again, going back to my dark, medium, light to get those ranges of dark, medium, light tones. But my main focus, like I said at the beginning, is to cover up the white. I don't want to focus on detail quite yet. So I'm going to move on to these whiter areas of the dog. And this is tricky because I've added this in. We have some white that's here, that's already in our reference photo, but here I'm going to have to do some improvising. So I could go with a lighter blue, or I could do a light purple. I don't want to take away from the purple nose, but I think I'll go with a light blue. I think I'll do that. All right, so what I'll do is I'll make a value that's much lighter because we're painting in white fur. So whenever I'm painting white, I'll either go with a light blue as my base or a light gray, sometimes even a light purple. And so I don't want to make this anywhere as dark as I've made these blues in the rest of the dog. So I'm mixing up lots of white, lots and lots of white into phthalo blue, and we'll be building up towards a white. All right, I just want to make a note here. It may take a few tries to get the proper base of the light area after you've done the dark area. So you remember how I said we kind of break it up into two parts. We do the dark, medium, light values for the dark area, and then for the spots or the stripes, we also do dark, medium, light. But you don't want to have two similar colors so that the viewers kind of confuse what they are. So just be patient, take your time with blending, and test out colors to see what works. Now there's a line that I want to actually make a little bit darker right here, and I will go a little bit darker with my blue in that area, but for now this medium blue will make up the base. So what I'm going to do, since I want to go darker before I go lighter, Just gonna add a little bit of phthalo blue into this. And just get these little creases. I can actually pull this up a little bit where it's getting less light. I'm going to actually see how we have in the reference photo, it's much darker here. Well, I'm going to mix in some more of my phthalo blue to get that darker value. We want it to be consistent with the other values. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to go, actually, I like this dark blue. It'll work for our darkest values for this white area here. So this same blue that I mixed here, I figured out that I'm going to use that for my darkest values before I go into that lighter value that we made. I'm not going to paint in the claws. I'm going to use a different color for that. I'm just going to do the white areas first. Now, I've said this many times on my YouTube channel, but I like to pull colors from one area and just use it and not waste it in others. And that's what I'm doing right now with the paw, especially because they're both white areas in the dog. Now, I left white because that's where we're going to get the lightest blues. All right, so I'm just going to pick up some more of that light blue that we started with. That's going to be our medium value because I went a little too light. I'm just going to paint that part in with this light blue. All right, now for more white, because we have to add our lighter values. This is really white. It's almost white, but it's got a tint of blue in it. And I'm just going to add some highlights to where the light's hitting. All right, and the last bit of white that we have to cover is these big old claws. I kind of like seeing the pinks in the dog's claws. It's just another way I can kind of bring in more color. For that, I'm going to mix up raw sienna, a little bit of permanent red, and white. Now this is getting very little light, so I'm also going to add a little bit black. So that's permanent red, raw sienna, black and white. And I'm going to fill in the base just where it connects to the dog's paw. I'm going to fill that in with this color. This is my smallest, this is a liner brush that I'm using right now. And I see that on these two nails here, but then those are much darker. On this one I can fill it in because it's getting very little light. But on this end one, what I'm going to do now is for the rest of the white on that nail right here, I'm just going to add, did I say that for the rest of the white? Yeah, for the rest of the white, I'm adding white to fill that in. Do you know how hard it is to talk and paint at the same time? It's definitely something that has really challenged me over the years. It's good practice. Every time I get a little bit better at it. And I'm going to create a dark gray for these two nails at the end. Just going to mix up a little bit of white into a good amount of black, create a dark gray. I'm going to paint them in, but while that's wet, I'm going to go over with a little bit of white just for where it's getting the highlight. Now I'm going to be careful. I'm just going to leave a little bit of white there because that's where that highlight's going to be. I don't want to just lose that other nail. Do you see what I mean? By just painting them both in, we'll kind of lose that. I'm just going to draw it off my brush. I'm going to pick up straight white and just add that highlight in between that line so it kind of separates the two. It's so small, but it definitely helps you know. The viewer now knows there's two nails there. Now it's time. We have all our white covered. Great, so that is my main goal. Check that box, all the white's covered. Now it's time, this is step 9, to repeat all the rounds. This is where I create more of that range of colors. Basically touching up layers, making them maybe a little bit darker. Like I could go a little bit darker here. I could go maybe a little bit lighter on this highlight here. This is where we kind of add that range while also covering up any of the colors that look a little transparent just because of how we applied the paint. So I'm going to do that now, starting with my darkest values. I'm going to create another navy blue with my black phthalo blue and a little bit of white. An important note I want to make about step 9 is that you will likely get different colors than what we mixed before. We're actually intentionally trying to get a range of colors, not the same ones that we started with. Does that make sense? So although we are trying to darken up and richen up those colors by adding more layers to them so they don't look so transparent, we are trying to get a range. That creates dimension, that creates that three-dimensional look that we're going for in our pet portrait. So we're still sticking to our values, and we're just trying to get a wide range of dark values, medium values, and light. Now I'm going to go to a little bit lighter, just adding in more white into that color I was just using. I'm just making it darker because I think I made it too light. Now for my lighter values, just adding more white to that. Now it's really tempting to kind of overdo things and rework things, and you have to really just make sure you give yourself that time to step back, look at your painting, and then make a decision instead of just going, like right now I could just keep going and going and going, but then I'll lose some of those values that I really want to keep, that I really should keep. All right, so the thing that we need to add is the details in the eyes. That's something that you want to make sure you go to until you get to your final touches. And then the other thing is, I have been getting so creative with my backgrounds, and I really think I want to do that with this background. I normally wouldn't be able to do that if I had a long-haired animal like we talked about, but I really can get around this guy because of his short hair. You can paint this background any way you'd like. I'm going to go to town and have some fun with color. But before I do that, I do want to add the highlights to the eyes. All right, I'd like to use a base even for the highlights of a light gray. And that's white with just ever so tiny amount of black. I'll lay that down where I see the light highlights, and then I'll go in with white if I need to. So I see a strong highlight right here. And I see this tiniest little one right there. Only need a few dabs and that'll do ya. And now the left side, I can go in with just white on my clean, damp brush. And I can just apply the smallest amount of white just on that eye. And that's really it for the highlights in the eyes. All right, creatives, so we have reached the end of part 1. And next week or sooner, I will be posting part 2 so we can finish up this painting together and give it to our dads for Father's Day. All right, guys, thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye.